If you remember back in that episode, I believe 16, was it?
Yes, I think that's correct.
We reviewed and talked about Suikoden 1. Amazing game, great game. Even converted Brian, the JRPG,
a little bit,
not so lover, into a liker of the series.
Mm-hmm.
We also mentioned in our spotlight of that segment the Suikoden Revival Movement.
That's right.
Which they are, just a not a small group of people. They started out as one, but now they've grown to immense proportions, and they're just continually growing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically trying to do a number of things, trying to get the recognition for the series out, trying to get releases on
PlayStation
Network, and eventually, the main goal is to hopefully see the continuation of the main series.
That would be incredible.
So Mark and I actually were able to get in contact with the admins from the group, and we were able to have a nice little interview with one of them. So we're going to go ahead and pop that on right now. All right, we're here with Ryan from the Suikoden Revival Movement. Ryan, good to have you on the show, man.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. We're just going to run a couple of questions by you. Fire back at us with everything you got. We want as much info as we can get out of your little program. It's, well, I guess not little anymore, huh? It's pretty incredible.
It's blown up.
Right. Mark, we're going to go ahead and switch off between Mark and I asking questions. He's going to start, and then we'll go from there.
All right. So for gamers who may not have experience with Suikoden, can you describe what makes these games special among RPGs?
Well, that's a long list. You guys say you want as much content as possible. Well, I could be here. I could be here all day, like literally talking about every little thing.
Absolutely.
But I think for Suikoden, what to me really makes it special is the story in general, but also just how well crafted the universe of Suikoden is, and how well thought out it is on a conceptual level, right? Like. Let's break this down and take a look at how it differs from kind of more modern and Western RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
For example, take Skyrim. In Skyrim, you were this individual who gained this enormous world-shaping kind of power, and then used that power as you saw fit within the context of the game. Suikoden's much different in the sense that it's more about a group of people coming together. And instead of emphasizing the power of the individual, it emphasizes kind of the power of unity and coming together. So the heroes of the Suikoden series don't necessarily themselves gain any kind of massive world-changing power like the protagonist from Skyrim, but the power is realized, the power to change the world essentially is realized through uniting the 108 stars of destiny, quote unquote, and bringing different people together from all sorts of different backgrounds and working together for a common goal. In Suikoden, some of the most interesting characters and one of the most interesting things about the game is the way that they bring in characters like, say, merchants, musicians, people who don't really have battlefield experience and aren't, uber masculine powerhouses, but have their own unique contribution to the army and to what's going on in the society. And that, to me, really speaks volumes about, the design philosophy and the writing philosophy behind Suikoden. Really sets it out from the more modern power fantasy games, right?
Absolutely. I think what's one, and just to kind of touch on that, is one of the amazing things is that, I mean, you see so many of these games that do focus on character development, but they focus on such a small amount. Suikoden has always done it with, I mean, like you said, 108 stars of destiny. How many games can boast 108, essentially main characters that each have their own thing to contribute to, the whole main part of the story? It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite characters from Suikoden 3 was Mel, the puppeteer, right? She would never even be considered for, a standard modern AAA game because she was kind of insane, right? She had this puppet on her hand that she would constantly talk to. And even the other characters in the game are just like, oh, this girl is pretty much just crazy. She's insane. And the puppet would always make lewd comments about her as well. It was really kind of hilarious. But even a character like that, where, in another game it would be kind of a throwaway character, in Suikoden it's very interesting. She's very interesting. She's well established and well written. And I think that as we move towards like the singular hero, and it's kind of as a powerhouse, we also tend to make them more generic, right? Because we want the player to project themselves onto that character as they're playing. Whereas something with a multitude of characters, like say Suikoden, you can really get out there artistically, and you can make some very odd characters without having to worry about someone not liking them. Because if someone doesn't like that particular character, then they've got 107 other characters to choose from.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What's funny is our third host that we have on the show, he's actually on vacation right now, but he had never played a Suikoden game before. We had him play through the first one a few weeks ago. He ended up loving it because which was funny because he always makes fun of us for liking JRPGs.
Yeah.
But then he played it and he was like, yeah, all right, yeah, it was good. So, but like one of his biggest gripes was he said there were too many characters,
which I really hated when he said that. I couldn't stand it.
But I'm trying to address to him like, playing the first game is great, but honestly, unless you continue the story and playing the other ones, and you see some of the repeat characters in there, you're like, oh my gosh, I remember this person from that one and stuff, and you get a more. Yes, they are not full on direct sequels, but they all take place in the same world and do have the same characters,
and the implications
correct
follow through in the games.
Yeah,
which is awesome.
I think that's better, to be honest, than just seeing a continuation of the same exact, one main character the next game up.
Yeah.
It really has done some amazing things.
Yeah, it really is. And not to be too critical of Western RPGs, I actually really liked Skyrim, for example. But one thing I think that's really odd here in America is we create this false dichotomy between the Japanese role-playing game and the Western role-playing game, when in fact that's just not true. If you ask many Western RPGers what one of their favorite stories is in a Western RPG, many will say Deus Ex for the PC. Deus Ex was released in 2000, directed and written by Warren Spector, legendary developer Warren Spector.
Oh yeah.
His favorite game of all time is Suikoden 1.
I didn't know that.
Suikoden 1 was one of the major influences on Deus Ex, and really showed Warren what he wanted to do, or what he could do with storytelling in games.
Oh wow! I
didn't
know that.
The dichotomy between the Western RPG and the Japanese role-playing game really isn't as harsh as a lot of people make it out to be. In fact,
yeah.
So
that makes sense. All right, well, we'll move on. The Suikoden Revival Movement has been featured on Destructoid, official PlayStation Magazine UK, and most recently an article in Konami's UK website. How did you all come together to form this movement?
Well, that's a long story. We're from all over the world. We have 3 original administrators. There's myself and Chris, who lives in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Matze, who lives in Germany. So we're truly a worldwide movement.
Yeah.
I met Chris years and years ago, and we've been friends for a long time, and we had been working behind the scenes to talk to Konami, talk to former Konami employees and people who've worked on Suikoden projects before, and kind of get their ideas for how we can move forward with the series. But this was all behind the scenes. And eventually we got kind of to a dead end where talking to Konami employees, most of them would just tell us to move up the chain to the production teams and to the executives. But unfortunately, it was much, much harder to get in touch with those executives than it was individual employees. So we hit kind of a brick wall, and after talking about it for a while, we decided to go public with the movement and to essentially let our voice be heard by Konami in a more public sense. And that was a year and a half ago, the end of July 2012. And since then, we've grown. We've added another administrator, Dan, who's from San Francisco. But we have people from all over the world, and this is something that could really only happen, in the modern internet age, right?
Yeah.
Because 20 years ago, Chris and I would never have met, but nowadays, it's interesting to see. And I've met some people who, through the SRM, I've met some people who've actually taught themselves English in order to play the Suikoden games.
Oh wow!
Right, like that's how big of fans they are.
That's commitment.
They had a base working knowledge of English and then brushed up on it in order to play the Suikoden games. It's really interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, question 3 here. How would you describe your opinion of the state of modern JRPGs?
Terrible. Just as blankly and as bluntly as possible,
Short and sweet.
I will say terrible. Not that I hate JRPGs. I love them to death. But I mean, have you guys played Lightning Returns yet?
I haven't. I have it ordered. It should be here in the next. Well, actually, it should be coming in as soon as 10 and 10.2 HD are released because I got them all together.
I'm sorry. I really. No, I kid, of course. But look, JRPGs, much like the modern shooter, right? Which started off kind of great with things like Doom and Half-Life.
Oh yeah,
they've really lost their way in this current generation, and there are a lot of factors that caused this. I mean, for example, in 2008 when the stock market crashed, most people don't know this, but it actually hurt Japan rather much more than it hurt the U.S. in terms of their economy, as well as the 2011 tsunami and quake, which was a tremendous catastrophe in Japan. So there are all sorts of outside influences that are influencing the JRPG market right now, from economics and natural disasters to just the rising cost of video game development and production as we move into 720 progressive and 1080 progressive resolutions, right? That's just that much more expensive to do.
yeah.
But internally, in terms of what's going on with the artistic side of the JRPG, they tend to rather oddly be enslaved to their own tropes and cliches, or B, they tend to defy them and I don't know, go off the deep end, I suppose is one way to say it, with Final Fantasy 13. Now, I didn't really like Final Fantasy 13. A lot of people I know really did like it. It was really controversial and...
Oh yeah, understatement.
yeah, controversial game to say the least. But they've gotten away from the complex characters and storytelling and imaginative storytelling that I feel really made RPGs great, like... obviously Suikoden, but also games like Earthbound, Final Fantasy VI,
Definitely.
And they've gotten more into the singular hero who really looks cool when they're standing on a gothic rooftop in a lightning storm. Right.
Yep.
They've become enamored with their own visual styles as opposed to the more internal artistic styles and things like just good writing, good characters, imaginative worlds, etc., etc.
I agree 150%. I mean, it just seems like when Final Fantasy 13 came out, I love the Final Fantasy series. I grew up with 4 and 6 and the old ones.
Yeah, so do I.
But 13 came out and literally I played it all the way through, gave it a chance. But then when people asked me what I liked about it, I was like, well, the graphics look nice. And honestly, that was the main thing I could think of, rather than because it did not feel like the older games at all. It didn't take me back to, how I felt back then when I played, the first time I played 6. Oh my gosh, I was blown away. And I mean, that's a Super Nintendo game that doesn't look anywhere near what there is now. And I don't know, it's disappointing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very disappointing, and I know that there are a lot of people that share our opinion on that too.
Sure, and there's people who like it too, and I'm not knocking that at all. But I think for most of us that especially came from the age when all these things were brand new and stuff, I don't know, it feels like the experience keeps getting more and more cheapened, I guess is the best way to say it. Just because they take out what we loved so much about it to try and do new things, but like you said, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that this coincides kind of with the increase in 3D graphics processing, and that we would have a marked decline in storytelling, almost inversely proportionate to how photorealistic our graphics have become. And I can't think that that's a coincidence, unfortunately. Right?
Yeah.
It's not the only factor at play here, but I can't think that it's a coincidence, and it's really tremendously unfortunate. Let me tell you a little personal story about Final Fantasy 13. I bought the game, and I was in college at the time. I bought the game, and unfortunately, my dad suffered a mild heart attack right when the game was coming out. You don't need to worry; he's fine right now. But when I was playing Final Fantasy 13, mostly what I was doing is I was either studying for college or I was visiting my dad, who had to have bypass surgery.
Yeah.
And really, I was tremendously stressed out, as you can imagine, during this time in my
Yeah.
life. And really, when I was playing Final Fantasy 13, I really just used it as an escape from, the stress of everyday life, obviously. And in that sense, in order for me to think that Final Fantasy 13 was a good game, all it had to do was just fulfill its role of stress relief for me at the time. But even then, I was playing through the game, and it still didn't work as a method of stress relief or escape from all the bad things that were going on in my life at the time. And that really speaks to how disappointing that game was, in terms of its storytelling. I remember there's one scene in Final Fantasy 13 where the main character, Lightning, actually gives a combat knife to another character named Hope, knowing that this character named Hope is going to try to use it to kill her sister's fiance.
Yep.
Right? And it doesn't make any sense in terms of character, in terms of plot, in terms of just basic logic or
Yep.
prudence. It doesn't make any sense at all, and it's just in there to make Lightning seem like a cool person rather than developing her as an actual character.
Absolutely. All right. Well, moving back on to Suikoden here. Do you have any insight or guesses into Konami's reluctance to bring Suikoden 1 to PSN in Europe or Suikoden 2 anywhere?
Well, that's a good question. It's difficult to really say at this point because, and I'll need to say right off the bat that I don't have any inside information with Konami employees or anything like that on
Sure.
this subject. But Konami is a very, I don't want to say troubled company, but it's a very fractured company right now. For the most part, the AAA aspects of Konami are focusing solely on Metal Gear and on Castlevania right now, which is understandable. I mean, they make the most money. But ever since, I believe it was 2004, when Konami moved from its more centralized location in Japan to more of a holding company, right, where each individual aspect of the company has large amounts of autonomy, things have been a little bit more. They've really lacked a vision moving forward from, say, 2004 or so.
Yeah.
And so what happens essentially with things like, the PSN, the PlayStation Network, and other digital download services, even like Steam, is they kind of get pushed aside because they don't have an overarching plan to address things like this, especially for their older games. What Konami feels is their less important titles, like Suikoden. So there's that, and then also it's not necessarily that they're reluctant. It's just the fact that they lack a real plan to release a lot of their older games on these digital distribution networks. And this goes for Nintendo as well. I mean, Nintendo has a few on their virtual console. They have games like, say, Castlevania 4, but games from the N64 era and later, they don't really have much in terms of Konami games. So essentially, what's necessary for Konami to release Suikoden 2 I feel at this point is to, appoint essentially a manager for their digital distribution networks and their classic releases. And that will help get, obviously, Suikoden II, but also Suikoden I in the European PAL region released on PSN, as well as other titles. I mean, for example, I would love to see Rocket Knight re-released digitally as well. I love Rocket Knight, yeah. Unfortunately, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles we might not see because Ubisoft now has they essentially bought out the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles contract from Konami, so... Yeah, more or less, we're probably not going to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles anytime soon. But other games like, Rocket Knight, Castlevania, stuff like that, and Suikoden as well. Another thing as to why Konami wouldn't release is having trouble releasing Suikoden 2 on the PSN is the future of the PSN itself. For the PS4, Sony has made it quite clear that it's mostly going to be streaming capable. And as such, the future of the PSN is kind of in flux, right? They don't want to pay a bunch of money and get Suikoden 2 released only to have the PSN shut down, say, 2 or 3 years later.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, yeah.
Right. So there's that as well. And Sony has had some language where they've said that they're going to try to release their entirety of the PS1 library via streaming over their Gikkai service. But we don't know if that's actually going to happen yet. That might just be corporate propaganda to help sell the PS4. Or it might be something that they intend to do fully, but just doesn't work out in the end. So everything's really in flux right now with the switch in generations. Though one of the things we're going to take up here on the SRM real soon is getting Suikoden 2 and Suikoden 1 released on Steam and Good Old Games and various other platforms like that as well.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
I hate to bring this up, but do you think the shoddy English translation for Suikoden 2 is any sort of roadblock?
That might be true. Actually, for one thing, I actually love the misquotes and mistranslations in the original Suikoden 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. I think they're hilarious. All of this killing in front of a children, it's just there's just nothing. There's just nothing like that. It's the old Spoony Bard thing from Final Fantasy II. I love it, for example, but it is somewhat embarrassing, let's be honest. So that might be a problem. Mm-hmm. If that is a problem, we're probably going to find out sooner or later, and I and the SRM can offer our services in that regard.
Honestly,
officially with Konami. So
yeah, and honestly, I mean, it is kind of a gripe, but it's a small gripe. And anybody who's played the game is like, it's there, but whatever.
Yeah, we do have writers. I, for example, have my degree in literature and creative writing. And I'm actually a published author as well. And I would be more than willing to lend my services to Konami,
awesome.
And the SRM to help with that if that's really a problem. There is one issue though, in that the PSN, for PSN releases currently, the game must be completely unaltered from its original PlayStation 1 release, which is kind of odd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't know that.
I can understand them wanting to, prevent revisionist history and all that stuff.
Right.
But things like translations, things like missing trademarks and registered symbols, you can go back and change those if you want to. It's fine.
The two most recent entries, Suikoden Tier Chris and Genso Suikoden Sumerger. Hold on. JJ forced me to take this question.
There
you go. All right. That is my shame to bear. Take place within the alternate Million World multiverse. It's safe to say most fans would prefer a return to the original continuity. How does the Suikoden Revival Movement feel about these games?
Well, most fans certainly would. I remember when the latest, the PSP Suikoden is usually what we call it because it was on the PSP. When that was released, there was a huge backlash because it was set in the multiverse and not in the more traditional, what we call the Murayama universe, the original creator of the series, Yoshitaka Murayama. Most fans certainly want to return. There's no doubt about that. But also, one of the things that's often overlooked, I think, with these multiverse games is that they tend to bring in new fans quite well, who then retroactively go back and play the old games,
Hmm.
and then become, huge members of our movement and huge fans of the games. For example, I know a lot of people whose first game was the DS game, was Terror Christ, the DS game. And they really liked it, and then they went back and played the older games, and they were just blown away as to how good they were. So overall, as the SRM itself, we can't really have an official. It's difficult for us to have an official perspective on
Right.
this, other than just to say we would most certainly prefer to have a move back to the Murayama universe, even if Yoshitaka Murayama is no longer involved. But at the same time, we don't want to insult or ostracize anyone who really loves these games,
Sure.
and that's perfectly fine.
Definitely. All right, we got a tough one for you here.
Okay.
Which is your favorite Suikoden game and why?
If I had children, you would probably ask me which one was my favorite. Just- no, I would probably say Suikoden 2, just overall, because that came right at the right time as well. Not only is the writing superb, and the characterization, but it also came right after Final Fantasy VIII, which to me was a huge disappointment in terms of the Final Fantasy series.
I agree.
Because you'd gone from Final Fantasy VI, which was great, to Final Fantasy VII, and then Final Fantasy Tactics, and then VIII really kind of started what we talked about earlier with the emphasis on form over function in JRPGs.
Yeah.
And then Suikoden 2 was released, and it's exactly the opposite. It emphasizes its brilliant artistry over any kind of, base graphics or quote unquote cool storytelling. And that really makes it very special for me. One of the interesting things, knowing what I know and being maybe a little bit older than most video game players nowadays, is that once you meet someone who is truly cool or who is truly badass, they don't really have to act like they are really cool or really badass.
Hmm.
Because they're free of that, because they just truly are intrinsically. And I think Suikoden is like that, whereas, a whole bunch of other games are trying to act like they are cool or like they are badass, quote unquote.
Absolutely.
But in reality, Suikoden just is amazing.
And it doesn't hurt it to have an incredible villain like Luca Blight in there too.
Oh yeah.
No, not at all. Yeah, definitely, probably my favorite villain of all time. I mean, he's, going back to what we were talking about what makes Suikoden different is Luca Blight is a great example of what makes Suikoden different, because he is a brilliant and powerful villain, but he's also a product of, more or less quote unquote realistic psychological forces. I mean, he was traumatized at a very young age when he was kidnapped by bandits, and his father essentially abandoned him and his mother for dead. And eventually they escaped and came back to the kingdom where he became prince. And ever since that time, his motivations throughout Suikoden 2 are really just vengeance against the nation that the bandits were from, and also his father, the king, who had abandoned him and was weak and cowardly, right? And that's why he wants to unite the two nations, the two major nations in Suikoden 2, and remake them in his image.
Yeah, I mean, one of our shticks that we do on the show is we try to do top 5 lists every episode, and one of our earliest episodes was we talked about doing our top 5 villains, and I mean, Mark and I looked at each other right at the beginning. We were like, Luca Blight, hands down. I mean, there's just nobody is. He made you want to just get to him and beat him down just because of the things he did. It was unbelievable. But the fact
Yeah.
that he's got that incredible backstory behind him, and you get to see that, like you just explained, the whole the psychological reasons for the things that he did.
Yeah.
I mean, it humanizes him, but at the same time, it's like, dude,
Well, it makes him real.
yeah, but he's still, you got to put him down.
Yeah.
Simple as
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I mean, in literature, we refer to this kind of as the post-Freudian antagonist, is what it is, essentially. That, instead of bad people just being bad because they're bad and having that kind of circular logic, what you do is you create well, I hate to use the term again, but more or less realistic backstory for them and psychology for them. And, you show how true evil, quote unquote, is actually created in society rather than just, blankly saying that it needs to be, wiped out.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
It's very interesting. And that's something that we're still, unfortunately, embracing in many modern games. I recently built a computer and I got Battlefield 4 for free when I bought my motherboard. And, well, it wasn't completely terrible, but unfortunately, in terms of the storytelling, the bad guy is very much the bad guy because he's bad and evil, right?
Yeah.
There's literally nothing interesting there about him at all in that story. Whereas, in Suikoden, it's tremendously interesting.
Absolutely.
The Suikoden Revival Movement has ballooned from 1,000 followers last January to well over 20,000 followers at present. What's up next for the movement?
That's a tough question. We're working on a number of things. Some things we're ready to make public, and some things that we're not ready to make public right now. We are looking for some more administrators to help us out with, the day-to-day operations of the Suikoden Revival Movement, and keeping our followers on Facebook engaged and things like that. Right now, we are still continuing with trying to contact Yoshitaka Murayama, the original creator of the series, as well as Konami executives and things like that, and trying to do things like interviews and get some feedback from them about what we can do to move the series forward, right, in terms of both getting Suikoden II onto the PSN and potentially new games in the series as well. So we're continuing to do that. We're also trying to get in touch with people in the industry outside of Konami, various writers and critics and things like that, to help us understand, exactly what's going on with the industry, and also come up with a workable financial scheme for any potential new Suikoden games that would effectively budget the game so that it could be made, and have various goals in terms of sales and in terms of fan reaction as well. So we're working on those things. We're also working on we're also working on Suikoden Day as well. Because I don't know if you guys know what Suikoden Day is,
Yep.
but it's a Facebook event essentially, where people from all over the world can kind of just come in and share their love of Suikoden. One of the founders of Suikoden Day is also one of the founders of the SRM, Chris from Edinburgh, Scotland. We've kind of separated ourselves from Suikoden Day a little bit in the SRM because it's a lot of work, right, to do both at once. But we still have contact with the current administrators of Suikoden Day, and we still feed some ideas off of them as well. So those are the things that are on the immediate table in terms of what's going on. We are also for the more long term, we're setting up Twitter campaigns, as well as mail-in and write-in campaigns, and Facebook campaigns to let Konami know again that we are very serious about wanting Suikoden 2 on the PSN, and also we're very concerned about the future of the series as well. And we're not going to really just let it go or die off into the night, because this is our favorite game series, or one of our favorite game series. So
And to be honest, you guys have come so far now. I mean, it'd be a shame to just quit at this
Yeah.
point. So.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of that has to do, you mentioned before in the second question about Destructoid and official PlayStation Magazine and all that. We really have to give a lot of credit to people like Jason Schreier at Kotaku and Jim Sterling at Destructoid, and now with the Escapist magazine, and people at the official PlayStation UK, things like that, who've been tremendously supportive of us over the past year and a half. But another thing that kind of speaks to Suikoden II is how many people in the industry who either make games or are games journalists now are huge fans of the series. Jason Schreier at Kotaku, Suikoden 2 is probably his favorite game of all time. Dale North, the editor-in-chief of Destructoid, listed it as one of his favorite games of all time, and also one of his games that seriously needs to be revived as well. So I guess it just goes to show that Suikoden fan base really is the most intelligent, talented, and handsome fan base of all, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, I think that about wraps it up. Do you have anything else that you want to anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say?
We are getting ready for an intensive Twitter campaign soon, so please check with us on Facebook at facebook.com/Suikoden Revival for more details on that. And we'd really like to get our Twitter numbers up to the point where they can at least compete with the Facebook numbers as well, and get the word out to Konami that we're really just not gonna go away. You can't appease us just by saying, well, we don't have any news about Suikoden.
Yeah.
Well, I'm afraid that's not going to work, right? So join in with that, and also to keep updated, we have some very interesting things coming up, I assure you, especially in terms of strategic parts of the movement, and also in terms of interviews with some really interesting people as well throughout the industry. So I think it's going to be well worth your time to come and check us out, or get back in touch with us too.
Excellent. That is incredible to hear.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think that about wraps it up. We appreciate your time, Ryan. Thank you so much for sitting with us and talking to us about just an unbelievable series.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. I mean, like, I can talk about Suikoden all day, and any opportunity I have to just sit down and talk about Suikoden is wonderful. I love it. So
Very
yeah,
cool.
don't be afraid to ask me back either if you guys want me back.
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry about it.
I mean, we plan on doing a review of Suikoden 2 here in the next few months. So
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds great, guys. Well, thanks.
all right, man. Appreciate it again. Thank you so much. All right, and we're back again. Ryan, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being a part of such an incredible organization.
Keep up the good work, man.
Absolutely.
I really want to see some more of those games.
It is amazing the things that they have done, and not only the things they've done, but in such a short time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and if you haven't already gone to their page on Facebook and looked at it, definitely go check them out. That's facebook.com/Suikoden Revival. Give them a like, hop in on the conversations, because there's always talk going on over there, and it's just even if you're not a fan of the series and you're curious, you go there and you see how passionate these people are.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, you play one of them. Like we've said before, it's on PSN. You play one of them and you will be converted. Guarantee
Absolutely.
it. It is an incredible experience.
You know what? Check out their Twitter as well. He mentioned he's trying to get more people on there.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Check out their Twitter as well. You can find them on our Twitter page, or they're at Suikoden Revival. So check them out on Twitter as well.
absolutely. All right. JJ, let me ask you a question.
What's that, Mark?
When was the last time you played an RPG where you are the chosen hero, foretold by prophecy to venture on a quest to kill dragons, challenge gods, and ultimately save the world from utter destruction? I'm guessing it was probably the last one you played.